introduce you all to Marta Ceroni, co-director at the Academy for Systems Change. Now, did the Academy used to be the Donnell Meadows Institute? Yes. So imagine our good fortune to have the co-director of the Academy for Systems Change with us today, where she helps coordinate research and content development building on Donnell Meadows' work. Marta earned a doctorate in forest ecology and over the years has become interested in economies that prioritize communities and nature. Yay! Yeah. Marta previously worked as a research professor at the Gunn Institute for Ecological Economics at the University of Vermont, where she also taught and did research on how nature contributes to people's well-being through services such as water purification by wetlands and climate regulation by forests. Marta has consulted internationally with the United Nations Development Program, quantifying ecosystem services to build capacity for local management of protected areas. She's also worked with students and professionals in courses online and in person, imagine that, and in what she calls ateliers, hands-on travel courses to solve a sustainability issue over 2 weeks. I would love to hear more about that. Marta works to balance scientific rigor, advocacy, and mindfulness. Originally from the Po Valley of Italy, Marta enjoys growing vegetables and native Italian cooking. She also likes to dance and, wait for it, play the accordion. Marta, welcome.
So just one other quick thing, encouraging everybody again to visit the tables of our sponsors. We're so grateful to them. And the Norwich Bookstore table, and Harris Webster's free lending library table with books that you can borrow, read, and then return to Harris. Thank you.
Also, there are some yard signs.
And yard signs, if you want a yard sign.
So I'll take my mask off, and thank you so much for having me here. I am a local, so it's been very nice to just, cross the river and come on this side. And it's been a pleasure to reconnect with John here. We've been colleagues, we've done some of those atelier courses around the world together. So it's exciting to be here, for sure. And so I think, first of all, I have a lot of gratitude for people who are doing the work on the ground, as John also said, in the small churches, in the small communities, in our individual lives. I mean, with these deeply ingrained drivers towards unsustainability, I mean, it feels monumental, and it feels like an important resistance that we're showing up for this work, that you are here. I mean, we're all monuments to going away from that centralized notion that growth is the organizing principle of the economy and of life. So with this workshop, we really want to take that leap, between, these big forces and the local action. What's in between, and how do you stay also grounded in reality without looking away, but at the same time not be, distraught by what's happening? And so how do we reclaim our core, our center, during these very challenging times of interconnected crises that show up in so many ways, in our very personal ways as well. And so this is what it is about. It's about how may we become a little bit more intentional or more grandiose with our ideas, inspired by the work of Donnell Meadows. So Donnell Meadows, I also have not met her, but I've had the pleasure to work at the institute that she founded in 1996, which has taken different names. When she founded it, it was called Sustainability Institute, and it was doing a lot of the modeling work on commodities and this why essentially systems like forestry or shrimp production or the milk, the dairy farming system in Vermont, it actually worked on that too. Why do they always deplete themselves and depleting the people and nature? So the bottom line of these systems are always like a depletion of people and nature at the same time. So she was into this question a lot. To me, her work is interesting because it provides, through a lot of the lenses that she shared, and not only the quotes, she wrote books, and she provided lists. You know, if you have seen the Leverage Points article, we have an online archive, which is donnellameadows.org. There is more than 1,000 of her writings there. And so we also have a physical archive at Dartmouth College at the Ronner Library, where all of her papers, her sketchbooks, her personal journals are. Pictures. I mean, I've spent some time in that library in preparation of a few events around Earth Day, and it's been such a blessing. And sometimes it's overwhelming. I was going through, I took a lot of pictures, there's a lot of, she was typing at the typewriter, Limits to Growth came out in 1972. It was the first warning and the first time that there was a promise that, oftentimes the conversation around limits to growth is about, what was there, like the doom and gloom. That was a big reaction that the world had to that big and important book. But she kept reminding people there was a promise in that book. And the promise was, what is the choice that we can make? And that question, what is our choice, was made multiple times. 72 was the first edition. Then 20 years later, there was the 20 years update. And then there was the 30-year update. And then we have the book of the 40th year update, where only one of the authors was like, okay, I'm going to do this. But the rest of the authors, for one reason or the other, were not part of it. But this is the 40th year. We have 50 year. So what is that showing now? Relentlessly, truth-telling. Donella Meadows would talk about truth-telling as an important thing. And so, how do you tell the truth? At the same time, you keep motivated in continuing the creative work. So Donella Meadows was also holding that creative orientation. We're going to talk about that in the workshop. So based on her creative orientation and the fact that she would treasure visioning and the visions, she steeped herself in the practice, almost daily practice of visioning. Whatever she would do, whether she was writing a book, she was teaching a course, she planted her garden, she would steep herself into the art of visioning, which is just kind of imagining all that is possible and beyond. Imagine what you really want for your future and the future of humanity. So she would really, she would say, well, I would make the world safe for vision, because it's unsafe oftentimes to just imagine all that is possible without limitations, because we are so used to actually bottle the potential, looking at what is possible. But in everything that she would do, she would just think about all that was beyond possible, that she really truly believed that she wanted, and then she would just it was almost like an act of prayer, if you will, and then you let that prayer out in the world, and many things would happen from there, because she would get very clear about what was the future that she wanted. And so by acting from that future that was desirable, she made a lot of things possible. And so that's an invitation for us today to create that space that is safe for visions, at whatever size they are, so that we can actually take our steps from that more visioning place, that possibility space. And so with that, I'll have my great friend and companion in a lot of these journeys that are not always easy. John will be here. I asked him to provide practical examples of what he's working on. And what I'll do, I'll share 2 frames, very simple, very intuitive, that can guide the conversations, but even before that can guide your own intentions. And so the way I would like to structure this space is really in 2 parts. In the first part, there will be like one frame, a simple frame, a little bit of journaling, and I have some paper and pens if needed. And then small group conversations where you compare what is emerging for you, like 3 or 4 people. And then we will harvest. And then the second part is similar, but a deepening of that first part. Okay? With that, I also want to share just a little bit of a grounding practice. We've been hearing a lot. You know, I haven't connected with John and his colleagues at UVM in a while, and I did that 2 days ago. I was like, whoa, you know, it's a lot, you know, to if you're not constantly into the data, they hit you. And so I was just, you know, a moment of connecting to this place in our body and checking in with us. And so what I would like to do is something that I normally do in my day. It's a practice that I came up with because I was struggling finding new rituals of mindfulness that weren't prescribed. And so this is one that I go back to. I invite you to follow me, you don't have to. But the first act would be to really maybe take in 2 or 3 breaths. And just notice the weight of your body, where it lands. It might land on the chair mostly, and the feet on the floor. And from there, I would like you to take your hands and put them on the heart. You can close your eyes or not, but I'd like to invite some spaciousness in your heart, because there's so much going on in our personal lives and beyond. Just invite the pain and the joy, the beauty and the challenge, the gap in between. So reactivating that muscle. And then I would migrate with my hands to the belly, a little below the belly button. This is a place where there's a lot of emotions that typically are here, a little bit above and a little bit beyond. Here is a place of activation. I mean, our friends in Chinese traditions know that this is the area of the qi, so full of energy. And so as we have activated, opened our heart, we're engaging with these energies of the doing, of meaningful action. That's where it springs from. Yes, and with that, we're going to move up to, I would call this part of the chest is the lungs. And I tend to really make an opening like this, like a feather-like. And it's like letting go of what needs to go and let come in what needs to come in support of you right now. You don't have to name it. If you breathe in and breathe out, that's another way to really be aware that you're inviting this in your body. Whatever needs to go that is not serving you at this moment can go, and vice versa. Whatever needs to come in that you really need that can serve you can come in. And with that, also in service of deeper clarity, so that we can actually see better each other, ourselves, and beyond. And so it's just a reminder of this clarity that we want to hold for ourselves, and avoid our projections or whatever, so that we have a clean, open interface among us, between us. Yeah, and then just a moment of stillness. Thank you for that. May we begin? All right. So, I always love this simple, practical tools that we can use at all levels of our endeavors in what we do in our life. And so I want to share with you the Wheel of Systems Change. This is the first of 2 tools And you could listen at two levels. One is like, well, if you like something like this and you want to use it in your communities, you're welcome to do that. And so you can listen with a facilitator. You might be doing something like this. So that's one level. The other level is like, oh, actually I can use this for what I want to practically do. So it's really applied to what you want to bring to the world. All right, so we start, oftentimes, like we just did with John, there was an impressive, touching, and engaging overview of what the monumental problem is. A lot of the work that I do, which is based on convening community leaders, organizational leaders for systems change or social change, it actually takes a step back and it takes a step of creativity. It's like, okay, well, it's not so much what kind of problem I want to solve, but actually what is it that I want to create and bring to the world. Maybe it is a solution to a problem, but we don't start from the problem, because the problem is like focusing on what you don't want, and it does not engage that kind of creative energy that we need to actually change and stay motivated. So a place where I start in the wheel, you can start anywhere, but it's practical application. It's one dimension, it's practical application. And I'll give you examples, and actually we're going to do a guided exercise on this, so don't worry about it. So what is it that you want to create, that you want to bring into the world? It could be at all levels. It could be personal, it could be a shift that you want to make in yourself, and how you show up into this work, or it could be at a community level, an initiative, at an organizational level. We'll provide examples. In fact, John will provide one. So that's one level. The other level is like, okay, well, whatever you do, you need some sort of support. Even if you engage into a personal shift, you might need someone actually who supports you in that. And so it's the community building piece. So who do you need with you? Who will be supporting you, your team, your group? Another level is that of building capacity. Okay, so what do we need to be able to do this work? And yes, you could think about funding, of course, but it's actually, is there something that I need to learn? Do I need to do a systems change course? Do I need to do a professional development course on something, or a climate action, 101 type of training, or other capacities? The other level is the level of research and learning. Okay, I'm embarking in this journey, but all of these things that we do are prototypes. Nobody's teaching us how to do things. Someone has led some initial projects, and so we can maybe follow those models that exist. But the reality is that each initiative oftentimes has its unique perks. So there's a lot to learn there. And so what do you set out to learn, and how will you share your learning? That's because oftentimes these initiatives tend to be isolated. I'm on the energy committee of Enfield, and so we're part of this larger network of energy committees. It's great. I love networks because these are learning networks and action networks where the learning can be shared. So there's a lot of learning happening, and it's always helpful to understand how you will orient and try to learn, because typically in the old model that we don't want to repeat and replicate, you prototype something, it fails, and then you move away or you are discouraged, whatever it is. But if you consider every single prototype as learning, then there's no failing, and therefore you reduce some of the barriers, right? So with that, I would like to invite John to share. Maybe he'll guide us with one example across the wheel, and then we can do some journaling, for which I have some prompts.
Okay, great. Thank you, Marta. Yeah, and it's actually folks that came up and talked to me after my talk went right to this, right? Like, this is all great, and what do we do? Right? What do we do? So that was meant to sort of set the stage for what do we do? What do we do? This is what we're going to talk about now. I don't teach this stuff as the sage on the stage, which I just demonstrated up there. We do this through, I like to call it problem-based learning. So we get big, messy problems and work with my students, and we learn by doing. That's what really resonates with people, right? So we've done, on the sort of practical application side, we've worked with watershed councils. We've worked with tribal groups in Tanzania. We've worked with youth groups in the Dominican Republic and Haitian migrant communities around health education. We've worked with young people here in Vermont, the example I gave around climate action. That's where things get activated, right? And that's where we see some leverage and some movement. So yeah, the example that I wanted to share with you is something I'm wrestling with right now. The University of Vermont was one of the early signatories to this president's commitment on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We led, but signing and pledging is one thing, right? As you might realize in some of your own organizations, but action is quite another. So I'm working with a group of students now, and we did a whole class on this last semester. Starting here, what are other universities doing? What do action committees look like? What is the role of students at universities? Where is their transparency around greenhouse gas accountability and accounting, right? Students go from University of Vermont's not doing anything, no one cares about climate change, everything sucks, to, oh my God, lots is going on in the space. Look at all these other great examples, and then I say, well, go around UVM and talk to facilities, talk to the library, talk to the physical education, talk to different departments, and they say, oh my God, there's lots going on, and people care about climate change. What's missing is that sort of synthesis, that aggregation, and the connecting of the dots, because we're so good at breaking things up into silos, right? So we just finished a whole assessment of what's happening on food systems, on energy systems, on landscape systems, what's happening on sustainability education, what's happening in procurement policies, right? It's the silver buckshot. It's all these things that are climate action. And now we're in a phase of community building. Since it's great to do this in the confines of a class, as an exercise, but then to break out into community building. And this is top down and bottom up, right? So we're working with the Student Government Association, the Staff Council, the Faculty Senate, right? But also the administration. We have an Office of Sustainability who reports to the finance guy. So guess what the finance guy says on every climate action that's proposed? How much is it going to cost, right? But we have to have the finance guy at the table, and we have to have the Student Government Association at the table. And we have to create these vehicles and avenues for creative thinking and capacity building, right? So we're just now moving into this phase of capacity building. Engaging with our Office of Sustainability, engaging with all the constituencies on campus, engaging with external communities like 350.org and Vermont Public Interest Research Group and Energy Action Network, and like we're the state university, right? Shouldn't we be leading by example? Mm-hmm. Instead, we get students in our class, we preach climate action, we say, oh, by the way, we don't do that ourselves. Go tell your communities to do it. So we're in that capacity building phase right now. And this is leading to more research, more learning, more collaboration, more, right? So to me, this wheel of systems change sort of resonates through all the kind of practical, hands-on project work we do. And to me as a professor, that's the best way to learn, is to get your hands dirty and to talk to people, not just email them. That's tough for the students to grapple with, right? And to kind of wrap our heads around what's your strength? Who should be at the table? Who's not at the table? That's often not asked, right? Who's not at the table and why? And at a university, which disciplines are represented and which ones aren't? And which ones have the most power and which ones don't? Disciplines that have historically, through my lifetime, that have a lot of power at universities are economics, business, political science, right? We need to change that. They need to be at the table, but they can't dominate the conversation. So that's kind of the shift that we're in the middle of at UVM. So I could give lots of examples of this, but that's one that I want to journal on myself.
Awesome.
That I'm actively engaged with. So thanks, Marta.
Thank you, John. Yes. Awesome. So we're going to go into journaling, and this is going to be a time for you to actually reflect on your practical application. So my question for you is like, I see some people have paper, but not everybody does. right, as you finish up your journaling, we're gonna organize ourselves into groups of 3 or 4 max. And I would like to invite you, once you join your group, and the groups are, can be anything, could be your neighbors, there's no structure to that. Once you are in your group, I would like to invite you to share your name and where you're coming from, and then share something from this exercise, from your journaling, whether it's an idea that you had or an impression about the process, whatever it was. But I would recommend that you all go in a round robin, I think it's called in English, so one after the other, and then and so maybe 2 minutes max for each person, and then because we're going to take 10 or 15 minutes depending on how much time we have overall. I think probably you can do 15 minutes, right, Anna? Because we started a little late, right? Yeah, okay, let's go with 15 minutes. And so once you're all gone in your small group, then you can have an open conversation. But I would really invite you to listen deeply to the other person with this position of the mind of really not thinking about the next thing, but just really noticing this person, also what kind of emotions might be part of what they're sharing. All right? So let's organize ourselves very simply, groups of 3 or 4. Take the distance that feels safe to you in these times. And then once you're there, we can start the clock. And how might we engage them? What are some of the tools or practices that can help us? This is in the capacity building, right? Or what capabilities will I need to develop? And what are we seeking to learn? Those are the 4 core questions for your journaling. Good? So we're going to give ourselves 5 minutes. Thank you for that. How was that? Can we hear from 2 or 3 examples of what came up for you? Anything that you noticed that struck you that you would like to share? Just briefly, let's hear from 3 people before we move on.
I'll make an observation that neither of you guys actually specified that I think we all ended up agreeing seemed true, is that this is a wheel and you don't go through it just once. You keep going around and there's not a particular starting place, but you can start anywhere. So like we ended up agreeing that seemed to be true.
Yes.
I'd just say that what really surfaced for me when I was using it was I'm so used to taking a project and trying to find helpers who will get the project done and find out who opposes it and figure out how I can convince them to support it. Whereas this really gets you, it just flips, it's a completely different perspective. You get the community engaged and try to generate creative support in lots of directions. It just seems rich. This seems like a good new tool. Thank you.
Thank you. Did we have one there and then there was one there? Okay.
Yeah, my hearing isn't the greatest, so I couldn't hear what everybody was saying in the hubbub, but I think one thing that kept coming up was, to my surprise, was the need to how to get the word out and how to get the support for the things that we're trying to do. To involve more people, get them to understand, to care. Would that be a fair?
Communication.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And one last, yes.
Yeah, I think it was interesting that one of the places that we went as a group was just inward, not, I think everyone in our group is action-oriented and has had opportunities to do climate work, etc. But the ecological economics discussion has really opened up for me to look inward at my own vulnerability and fear and try to deepen understanding of how this could work. And so, and that kind of brought up just that whole dynamic of needing to be more connected with other people. Not necessarily, I guess to get things done, yes, but on a more spiritual and interconnected way, to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to allow ourselves to ask for help. And that's kind of hard in the American culture.
Yeah, okay, one last thing.
I want to share my mother's organization. Her motto was, to know is to care is to act. And I said, Mother, you've left one out. To act is to know.
So we close the loop.
So it's a loop.
Yes, thank you. This was amazing, you know, like sharing and processing together what this is about. So including also going back to the deeper level, and something about, in my field of work, we are investing more and more attention in relational work. So that building community, then it becomes not so much the expediency of it, or like you were pointing out, it's not so much to get the work done, but it's actually because we really care. And I mean, I know that this community cares, but that brings attention to an approach that has been kind of millennia long, to be honest, and it's just been robbed out of our consciousness, through the domino model, essentially. So thank you for that. Those were all very helpful observations. So we are moving to the next phase of this, building and going deeper on what we have so far. So the next level that we can go is, you can see, maybe you guys have seen this before. It's definitely some folks have seen it before. The Iceberg Model, which in a way is inspired by Donella Meadows, although she didn't come up necessarily with this term, but it really delves deeper into what Donella was thinking about, the leverage points. What are points that really give us, there are places of power, she would say, in a system that if you can engage at that level, you can bring a lot of shifts. Some of the shifts that John was talking about, some of the structural shifts in particular. And so this lens of the iceberg model, of course, builds on the idea that the iceberg is on, what we see is the 10%, the famous 10%, and everything else is below the surface. And so before going into the details, this idea that the iceberg model actually is a conceptual tool that can guide us in an instant when we read the news, it's like, oh, this happened, guess what? Is this connected to what, it's a reminder of going deeper, because the news, as Donella Meadows knew already, tend to have these very episodic events and if you read at that level of reality, it feels like a disconnected, or even worse, some of my friends who are not very much into the systems work, they're like, they see everything connected. I mean, a lot is connected, but not everything is connected to everything. And so it's actually helpful to discern and distinguish, right? And so the events level is very confusing. I've seen some correlation drawings that were actually really scary. At any rate, event level, I lately have been working a lot on homelessness, in supporting the system's approaches to homelessness in Italy. There is a national network of hundreds of centers of all faiths and all designations working together as a learning network, and that is already a systemic organization. They organize themselves as a system that can learn and connect together, and they selected one solution that for them was a systemic solution, which is housing first, like giving people homes first, as opposed to having people without a home go to all the different steps before they can actually deserve finally a home. And that is a revolution. We'll talk about it. That's an example. But anyway, at that event level, one example of an event is, well, I see homeless folks on the street, and so okay, what does that tell me? If you go below that level, at the level of patterns, I mean, has it been always like that, that we have seen folks on the streets that they don't have a place where to go? How has that changed? And how is the reaction to that change over time? And if we don't do anything, what's going to happen? And where does that come from? That is more like in this part. So the deeper we go, the deeper we go into the why. And why, the question why really gets at the structures. And some of the structures are tangible. You know, okay, so why is it happening that, you know, we have increased homelessness in Italy, but I don't know actually the data for the US right now. But, you know, COVID has made a huge difference. And I mean, all the interconnected crises, now Ukraine, being Italian, you know, there's dozens of thousands of Ukrainian folks and refugees actually going to some of the homelessness centers right now. And so that's, you know, you can get into the why of the structures. We can go to more examples. The reminder, I think the main reminder of the Iceberg Model is really to go not only to the structures, and as I'll get to the details, but it's also to illuminate the mental models, you know. So what are some of the mental models that have allowed a deepening of the problem of homelessness in Italy in particular? And you can argue that, for example, there's been a mentality of fixing rapidly the problem on the surface, but never really getting to the fundamental solution that would really address the problem. And the more investing in the symptomatic solution that could be like shelters, which are needed and important, but you cannot exhaust all your energies and all your funding there, that, you know, it actually erodes away the potential to invest into the more fundamental solutions. So it's very important to really understand where do shelters come from. Like it is a certain modality of helping out, you know, that there's also like a power relationship there, you know, like in terms of like I help you because you are in need. And so there is a certain level of, I don't know, perpetuating in a way a certain type of narrative there. But examples of structures I wanted to give you. These which can talk about structures in terms of, it could be organizations, you know, like in my example, the shelter is a response, it's a structure, right? But it could be structures of power, it could be an organigram of an organization, it could be also the way the resources flow. But it could also be semi-tangible things, like the quality of the relationships that get improved or not within a context. And so all of these things are important. And I would like to invite John to actually maybe run us through the iceberg with your example, if you will, like the example that he was talking about earlier.
Oh, thank you, Marta. Yeah, I love the Iceberg Model. I mean, I think for obvious reasons, because I've spent a lot of my career trying to escape this focus and move to this, right? Move to mental models. I think economics, as it's taught to 1 million plus undergrads, just undergrads in the United States every year, is dangerous. It's a kind of mental model that separates the human from each other and from the earth. So at the very basic level, the kind of work that Marta and I have been doing is simply embedding one system inside of another and emphasizing the interrelationships, right? Versus this ideology of separation. And I am doing much soul searching, writing this book, and kind of coming to my own terms of growing up, raised Roman Catholic, is I feel like this separation, this emancipation of humanity from the earth comes a lot from at least the interpretation of a lot of our Judeo-Christian belief systems, of the human on top of the ladder of nature, right? Instead of the human embedded in a living system, interdependent on each other and on all of the earth. So I apply that right to things like climate action and climate work, right? The embeddedness of the student in the university system and their point of view throughout their education. The embeddedness of the University of Vermont in Burlington, Burlington in Vermont, Vermont in the US, US in the world, right? To really kind of understand these powers and structures and patterns of behavior as reflections of these mental models, right? And to sort of understand that where climate action at the University of Vermont sits is within the Vice President of Finance, right? Who himself has a military background. So there's an interesting mental model there that I have to kind of come to terms with and be thinking about as we're preparing to do climate change at our state university, right? And to realize this sort of emphasis of our university administration on STEM education and on technology as the kind of magic bullet cure for everything, versus more systemic change around power and privilege. More systemic change that looks like transparency and involvement. More systemic change that empowers the students instead of sort of puts them in their place. Right? So these are the kinds of, when you start to sort of go from a mental model of interdependence versus individuality and power hierarchy, and the kind of things we're taught at universities of a winner-takes-all society. I'm sorry, I'm getting really philosophical. Where's my soapbox? Right? These are the things that we have to unpack to get to new patterns, new structures, and hopefully new events. I'm not sure if that's quite what you had in mind, but that's
Yes, well, yeah, that's great.
those are some of, that's what stirs my thinking when I think of the Iceberg Model.
Thank you for that. And are there any questions or comments? I keep looking at Tristan because Tristan has done so much work on this. Would you share anything about this, just to enrich the conversation?
Well, it's an interesting question. I'm happy to think out loud with you all. I'm going to take my mask off because I don't project my voice very well. I think at the mental model level, for instance, if we said, if we started with life is about reciprocity as opposed to life is about growth and competition, what shifts, and that's one example. Or in the housing example that you talked about, I think a lot about, for instance, how in our community, we're in Brattleboro, it's very easy for people to say, oh, well, homelessness is a problem that Groundworks needs to solve, as opposed to homelessness is a function, it's something that emerges out of the system that we've all agreed and become complicit in agreeing is normal. And so what would be the mental model? I think about what is the mental model that I hold and mental models that I hold that allow me to make sense of the world in a way that says homelessness could be the problem of an organization that's trying to deal with the causes, the impact of homelessness in our community, as opposed to what is the mental model that I hold that would make it so that I could see that as wonderful a job as they're doing, it's all of our problem, all of our responsibility, and how do I shift out of that? Just two examples.
Thank you, Tristan. And there is a reason why I asked Tristan to intervene, because he's been steeped in systems thinking and systems change and teaching and legislating, and so it's a wonderful thing that you're here, you and your wife. So thank you. All right, to continue, because I think these are very thought-provoking observations. I would like to invite you now, before you join new groups, ideally, let's make them smaller this time so that we can have maybe more back and forth. So 2 or 3 max people, like small groups, and thinking about, so you started with an idea, you started with a reflection, and you heard other people in your group, something shaped in that particular group, so your original idea might have shifted a little bit, you might have been enriched by all of that. So maybe, as you think about your practical application, why don't we just dive deep and go to this mental model level and think, okay, what shifts in our minds to and hard, obviously, not disconnected, do we need to make in order for that practical application to actually have a deeper, lasting type of effect and more impact? And so that's a question that I would like to invite you, if you want to take a couple of minutes to journal before going into small groups, you're welcome to do that. Otherwise, you can start moving chairs, whatever your style of reflection is. All right? So you're all different. So the question is, what mental model would you like to embody as you think about your practical application? All right. I hope you're having good thoughts, good conversations, inspiring connections here. I can feel the energy for sure. Can we hear from 3 people? This time you mean it. This time I mean it. Like, I'm so eager and so, yeah.
I got one.
Okay, here we go.
So Sylvia, my partner here, the mental approach, which I actually loved, was the ability of humanity to change, human beings to change and adapt. And I like she said that there is a lot of change in life and the ability to adapt. And I just felt like that was a very positive approach to take in any kind of lecturing or preaching or.
I love that. Thank you for that. A couple more.
One mental model for the church is that we need to stop thinking just in terms of doing virtuous things, and we need to start thinking about getting involved in political processes.
Wow, that's a deep one. Good one. Over there.
I think a mental model for any organization is to build relationships, to try to build a common bond and language before you try to solve a problem.
I love that. So that the action is not the first thing, but it's.
Yeah,
Thank you for that.
that you somehow become comfortable and can discuss anything with each other.
Yeah, wow. That's a big one. I think we are staying at 3. Thank you for that. And we're wrapping up our session here. So if you want to share just, we can just go around and share one thing that you might be grateful for as you leave this session. We can just have a little bit of a gratitude bath for each other at this time. So this inner circle, anyone who wants is not, you can pass as well.
Well, these principles of systems thinking that you're trying to get us to spark, right? To me, we talked about in our group just now the principle of faster or slower. Right? I mean, the ability to step back, think, engage, build community, work through process, all that takes time. But it also means that you can end up with enduring solutions that are lasting, solutions that are inclusive, solutions that have a lot of buy-in. My tendency is to go the quick fix, and then the quick fix isn't usually very lasting. So that's something we were talking about. This all reminds me of when I'm part of a community.
Thank you for that. Yeah, as we go around, maybe you just one word or 2 words for something that came to you in this workshop.
Insight.
Hope. Hope.
Joyful hope.
Joyful hope. Okay.
Spiritual.
Spiritual.
Material.
Community. Learning together.
Interreliance.
I love that.
Courage.
Go deeper.
Critical thinking.
The long haul.
Yes.
Collaboration.
Listening.
Transparency.
Change, not charity.
Wow.
Change and not charity.
Well, thank you so much for being here and for all that you have shared. And we are getting into the break. And I think Betsy or Donna will step in for the next instructions, but thank you again.
Thank you.